They talk nice now, huh?
I skied.
Oh, yeah. Just say that's a shame.
I'd like to do it, in fact, on Christmas.
It's not my thing. I gotta run back and get it.
Bill, looks like it's over here.
Go up there on the weekend. Yeah, you're a big.
Well, I took 6 years off and then I re-upped my equipment last year. I get sucked in on all the latest and greatest, dude.
Same with motorcycles, right? I mean, we
Yeah.
kind of went through that phase with motorcycles.
Guys, all that.
I do too. That's where
I'm
Yeah.
Motorcycle, like, especially the older you get, the more gear you pile on. Like, you constrain, like, it's just like moves fast. I push it down. I got like,
But you gotta go to road bike then.
I have all that.
Good.
I just am not settled. I moved out here from Boise like 7 or 8 years
I wonder
ago.
what.
I've been paying for 2 storage units.
Maybe you went to a specific class or
My
something.
biggest mistake was choosing here over
One of the things.
Josh and Park. I was signing on the house out on that mid-century modern house, and I wish I would made that because I don't have anything to show in politics. And now I'm
And that was outside the city?
yeah, and now I'm trying to get my it's like great full time.
Oh.
So did anybody have any documents from Friday to give me? Because I didn't get any.
It's up and down.
And I saw papers on the tables.
Just retired.
Yeah.
Well,
sorry.
Wouldn't that be?
It was just the book.
Then I'll supplement it somehow.
That's what I have.
If I
And that's,
don't
I even
business,
shared it.
I build a bottle somewhere.
Okay.
'Cause of our
Works for me.
and
Just wanted to make sure.
Tamarack has the owner. I'm gonna go back to.
I'm almost done watching it.
Yeah.
I tried to watch it while I was
Oh.
traveling and it was hit and miss.
Riveting, huh?
Well, it's even better when you have the buffering signal come almost every 5 seconds. You're like, oh, I finally got it to start going and now it's buffing again.
It was,
And you go between the two hills and I'm like, oh, I might as well just turn it off.
Yeah. Question asked. Time for question answer. They only had 2 questions, one for Wayne and one for.
yeah.
Guy.
Yeah, from the.
Was it January 3rd?
What was the new one?
The charter question was about the lottery. How forward was
Right.
about how the lottery works, and then Wayne's question was if somebody has a career aspiration, do they have to stick to like.
Okay, guys, we're ready. Okay, good evening, 7:00. Call the meeting to order. We do have a quorum. If you can stand for a pledge of allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all for coming. This evening's meeting is about our levy, the facility levy and a maintenance and operations levy. And in our packet, we're going to be going over a PowerPoint on title Levy 2019.
So, Madam Chairman, I'd like to ask the board how they would like to approach this, because this is the PowerPoint that we looked at the last board meeting. We've added a little bit, and we'll continue to do so, to the list of projects as we identify. That'll be a continual process, as you have a master list of projects, always gets added to over time. So I would, rather than me just start talking, I would prefer the board to tell me, what direction do you want me to, I mean, I'm happy to talk, but how can I serve you better?
Madam Chairman, it would be good to know what you've added since the last time. And I would, I've gone over the list of, the projects and I guess I'm a little confused as to what would be in this levy. You know, what that money, and I understand on the 10-year levy, that's going to be a little difficult. But for the next 2 years, do you have projects for that specifically?
We have not identified the projects for that. Mr. Smith and I have been talking about that process. About this time, we sit down with the principals and go through their buildings and say, what do we need to fix and those types of things to make sure we have it. We know there are certain things we're going to need to do over the next couple of years. For example, the fire suppression systems at both Shadow Butte and Carberry. We've got to start replacing pipe there. So that's one of the items that was on the list before. We didn't have a number amount to. So as we've talked, we think we'll just put $20,000 a year into that for right now. We're not sure how much it's going to be until we start doing those projects, and they'll probably be different depending on where in the building you're doing it. Some of the places are fairly easy to get to. I'm not sure anything's easy when you get up into an attic, but some of them are rather difficult to get to just because they're in corners of buildings and other places that are more challenging. And then we will go through that list and identify what are the priorities for this year and for next year. And should have that. Our goal is to have it by the February board meeting, the actual list for those two. So that's for if we split this, that's for the facilities, plant facilities levy. The other levy, doing the same process right now. And so what I've done is added to the 2017 levy, which is in your packet. I can pull that up. Well, I'll pull it up here. I don't want to frighten people when I pull this thing up. So what I've done is just add to there probably two positions that we're looking at. I still got a meeting with the administrators next week where we will go through and discuss this in greater detail. But one of the positions that the elementary teachers especially would like us to have is an elementary counselor. And we're looking at one that maybe split it between Shadow Butte and Carberry. And then I've been working with Mrs. Thomas over there to look at what our special ed needs are for next year. We have a tremendous number. Tremendous means about 6 students coming out of our preschool program, moving into our program at Carberry next year that are what we call Tier 3 plus students. So these are students with higher needs. And we generally have 2 or 3. And so for the past couple of years, it looks like we're going to have about 6. So it's adding a lot of pressure to our program there. So we've added some paraprofessionals for special education. Now, the others there, the process that Cheryl and I will work on in the next couple of weeks is I have to go through that list and see which ones of those we've been able to move to the general fund funded by the state. And I need to pull up each person, see how they're funded, and see what they are. So my goal is to whittle that number down some. I don't think it'll quite be where it is. I'm showing you my rough draft. I get a little nervous about because somebody will say, well, you said it's 600,000. I think it'll be less than that. I expect it. But Cheryl and I need to go through and look on the funding. We also need to go through and do some estimates on enrollments for next year and go through our salary-based apportionment. So we'll do that. Hopefully I'll have a good draft for you for the February board meeting on that number.
Is this document in our packet?
This one is not.
Okay, I was trying to.
This is my notes document. The one that's in your packet, and this is built off this document. This is in your packet.
Okay.
Okay. And it's built off that. I've just started to add items to it. I haven't taken anything away yet. I just added those 2 items to it. I have taken a few items away in what I'm, oh heavens, it flips to another page, doesn't it? Down here in the teaching and learning part, that was our moving to blended learning. So we've been able to take some items out of that list, and I'll just talk through you real quick.
Just if I can go back to that, get you to go back to that previous one there, because there was a question I had looking over those.
You mean the one that's in your packet?
Yeah,
Okay, yep,
right there. Or it's, oops, back down.
sorry.
It's okay. The roof, it looked like it said that it was going to be done in the summer of 18, but that middle school gym roofing,
Yes,
that was not done in summer 18, was it? It's,
no, the board made a decision not to do that.
yeah, so that one is still, okay.
Yeah, at the February board meeting, we will have a proposal for you. We're working with our architectural firm and a constructional engineer. We had a constructional engineer up there last Friday looking at it, and we learned some things that we're probably gonna have to change how we do this. And so we're until I know more, I don't know if I want to say much because I don't know very much yet, until I get his report, and he's actually talking with the city and others as to what we need to do. But that has not been done. No.
Okay.
This was the plan. I just didn't change it from
Okay,
from what the plan was. Other questions? So on this, the teaching and learning part, we've been able to do a lot of this work. So we've been able to take off. I'll come back to this one. The IDLA consortium, we will continue to do every year. Our professional development will continue to do professional development, but I've reduced the amount of spending on professional development down. And I need to work with Dr. Roberts to make sure I've got the right number on that. But as we move into this, it should be less professional development, but we still will have some in that. Chrome devices for students and device replacement are completed. And so we currently have all of the devices we need. Plus, we are planning to use the funds from the state for technology, classroom technology, to do the replacement. So we'll have a group we will buy every year, new, and replace it. But our current funding from the state should be able to handle that without any problem at all. So we're taking that off. I've reduced the amount of here on curriculum materials. Well, I haven't reduced it a lot. This curriculum materials I've given us $20 per device for what I'm going to call apps that we want to add to them. And so I reduced that number down. Integration specialist, I'm moving up to the staffing. So we still want that position. We have that position. Mr. Woods does that for us. Internet access assistance, I've reduced this number down a little bit because we haven't had to spend as much. What that is we know there are kids that don't have, families that don't have internet access at home. And so they can check out of the library a hotspot and take it home and to do it. And so we have so many hotspots that are available, and we're just, when we created this budget to begin with, we didn't know how many we would actually need or use. And so we know a lot more today. Waterford Early Reading is a program we will continue to use. And then we've put in about the same amount of money a year, $200,000 a year for curriculum. The next round is probably science. Science books probably won't cost us that amount for that one, but what we will spend money on is probeware. Some of the science experimental probeware that you would use in classrooms. We need some upgrades in that. So we think.
Now, wait, when you say probeware, you talk about programs?
When I say probeware, what I'm talking about is I can hook up a heart monitor to my computer and watch the heart, or I can hook up a brainwave monitor to my head from my computer and use it for science. And you can hook up and imagine a science experiment you would like to do. That's what we're talking about, the equipment to do those science experiments. But the actual proposal for that, I should have at the next meeting for where we are with it. Other questions?
I have a question. So when you go around and ask the principals what they need to have done at their schools, so that's gonna be the facilities levy.
Yeah.
And right now,
That's
it's
correct.
under maintenance.
The plant facilities levy. Currently, we have one levy, which are maintenance and operation levy. So if we decide to split it to two, which we're proposing, yes, that would be for the plant facilities levy. It's a process we do every year. And we have a pretty good list, so I don't think it'll grow a lot, but there's always something that we learn as we go through that somebody will say, well, I forgot to tell you about this.
So by law, we have to spend 600,000 a year on maintenance. Is that correct?
By law, we have to spend $611,000 in student occupied buildings.
So is that underneath the maintenance or would that be underneath facilities?
The title there is called student occupied facilities, but it's maintenance, yes. That's the category.
Facility, what would be facilities then? Then,
It's the same term.
okay.
It's how the state put it in law.
Madam Chairman, Wayne, on your PowerPoint, it's talking about puts 300,000 more into the facilities each year and reduces the amount available for staffing and other projects. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Well,
That's what you're thinking there? Because
what
to
I'm
me, it sounds like we're, instead of splitting it the way it was, we're leaving 400 in the operations and putting everything else into the facilities. Is that my
Well,
understanding?
And that was my original proposal. What I will probably tell you is when I get to February, because I've been playing with these numbers a little deeper now, every time you get to this, my recommendation is probably that we're going to spend about, it might be an additional $200,000. So it may be closer to, instead of 7, about 800,000 for the operations levy, and then 700,000 in the maintenance levy, as my proposal. So it's just as I've been working on staffing and those and what the numbers have come out to. My current numbers in my rough estimate is about 910,000. So I think I can get that down some, but I'm not sure how far I can get that.
So that won't have any facilities in that.
No, we would pull out the facilities out of that altogether. So I'll bring that spreadsheet back up. I have it at the bottom, I do. Bring that spreadsheet back up here at the bottom. So if you'll notice on the last levy we did, there were 3 sections. The appropriate staffing, maintain quality facilities, and moving to blended learning. So I'm pulling out the maintain quality facilities entirely from the maintenance and operation levy and would move all of that to the new plant facilities levy. That makes sense, Bob?
I think I'm still kind of lost on it, but yeah.
Madam Chairman, and Wayne, that was one of my 3 questions I had as well tonight. Kind of an exploration of that shift, where or how were we gonna make it up, if at all? And the way I wrote it was, the proposal seemed to, identify that currently we have about 1 million of our M&O for non-facility expenditures.
Yes.
And the proposal would be to reduce that down to 700,000, hence less $300,000 available for non-facility expenditures for the next 2 years. How and where do we, and I appreciate you saying that number might go up to 800. So still a $200,000 gap or difference of what we're doing now. What's the thought on how to replace that or cut to make that work?
Yeah, and so one of the nice things about the cut, honestly, is that we had in our last levy $166,000 a year for Chromebooks, and about $105,000 for teacher training for blended learning. So I'm really looking at moving that teacher training number down to about 40,000 and eliminating the 166,000, because we still will have to buy replacement Chromebooks, but the state of Idaho has funding for technology. And in both the governor's proposal and in all the proposals I've seen is to continue the funding level. If they continue the funding level and do not increase it, there is sufficient money for us to continue to buy the Chromebooks over time. And that had always been our plan, that we knew we had to kind of get it jump started, the big money up front, but once we got there, we could do the maintenance of it. And so our plan is that we will replace all of our Chromebooks every 5 years. So there'll be a fifth replaced every year as we go through the process. So those are, there's 200,000 right there.
Right.
We're taking out of the budget. So that helps us a lot. It's the staffing that I've got to figure out where we.
Do we go 100,000 more, or
Right.
do we just stop at the 2?
Yeah, and I apologize that we just haven't had the time to sit down and go through that analysis of exactly where we are in where the money's coming from. So
Thank you.
I will get through that.
And the only other, Madam Chairman, the only other 2 comments I had that I prepared or thought about and wrote down here were, what's the time frame on the facilities committee for a report to the board, and ultimately the time frame from the board to make a decision on running the major facilities bond for a remodel or new construction or whatever the facility committee's recommendation or report might be? What is that time frame, if you kind of have an idea?
Well, the facilities committee hasn't done a time frame, but I'll tell you my hope. Can I put it as a hope, but not because I don't want to. But we actually had a very nice tour on Monday of Ridgeview High School. Principal did the tour and did just an excellent job of talking about the impact of a facility on teaching and learning, and from that perspective. The survey, I think, is done and should be out. I'm not sure on that, so we should be getting survey information back or have that soon.
We have 49 respondents, so it's.
So it is out.
It is at least out to 49, and I don't know how, I'm not aware of the next step, but that's how many respondents we have.
So we can start moving and getting more respondents as we go for that. So my hope would be, to be honest with you, is that the committee would have a recommendation to the board in probably April, sometime in there, and the board could take a look at that. There's some more work we will have to do, but I would like to see, if we're going to run a bond this year, that we run the bond in November. So once the committee does a recommendation, then we have to get, and the board says move forward, there's some work we have to do with architectural firms, the bonding agency firm to get all the numbers so that we can actually put the numbers together for what it would take to run the bond. We have to get a bond attorney. We have a bond attorney. We just have to have her put together the language for us so that we can have the actual language that you will vote on as the board. So it takes a while, all that takes some time to do it. So if we got that, the kind of the recommendation in April, even May, we have some time, but I'm doing this stuff out of my head. I had it in here in a PowerPoint, so I've got to remember, but I believe it's September 1, you have to have made that decision to run the bond in November. But I think we're going to want to put a bond committee together and a bunch of things this summer as we go through it. So there's quite a bit of work to do to make that. Now, whether the committee makes a recommendation to you or not, but that would be my recommendation. I think it's time to.
Okay, and then my third comment, Madam Chairman, And just when this idea came forward a couple months ago, I think it's a good idea. I think it does provide for some planning and the ability to be thoughtful in a long-term vision. My concern is running two separate options could result in a split decision. And that would put us in a pretty significant deficit on where to the extent that there were people who had a strong position in opposition to one, they're saying vote one, but vote against the other. And particularly as it relates to the facilities, 10-year, where we have to have 55%, where that, if we are going to be talking about running a major facilities bond, that there could be some opponents of that who say vote no on your second choice, or B, right? Vote to support the teachers and the general bond, the M&O, but on the facilities, vote no. And because we're going to be having a major bond for you to think about here in 6 months or something, which would be devastating. That would be a devastating result, because I do see them as sort of as apples and oranges in a lot of respects. But from a choice standpoint, and for people who have a strong opinion one way or the other, my concern is that it could result in a devastating result where we get one option but not the other. And I know you've probably thought about that a lot and lost a lot of sleep.
I'm worried.
Lost a lot of sleep about that. But I guess I just wanted to kind of raise that, and I would call it the elephant in the room, if you will, and see what your thoughts are.
Madam Chairman, Mr. Fleming, honestly, that is my concern. That putting two levies out there, first, it'll cause some confusion. There's no way it doesn't cause some confusion. It's just, people won't quite understand what we're dealing with. I think we can explain it well. And it is probably one of the things that I think the board needs to consider when we talk about splitting this into two. Do you want to continue to run it like we have and just include the maintenance in the maintenance and operations levy? Because essentially that's what we've done. We've put 400,000 or so in maintenance and operation every year, in the maintenance side of the maintenance and operations levy every year, and designated it for that. Or do we look for a long-term solution? Part of my hope is that as I look at districts around the state and how they've operated, those that have had the maintenance and operation, the plant facilities levy for a long time, they just have a solid set of money that they can plan on, make decisions on, decide when they're going to spend it, what project it's going to go for. And I think we ought to be, there was some talk about, should it be a larger number? I think we need to be conservative. We need to be thoughtful. If we run into a place 5 or 6 years down the road that something happens, we'll have to figure out what to do 5 or 6 years down the road. I can't promise you the future. I know you would like me to, but I can't. So I think there's some advantage to it, but I'm not sure I'm willing to talk anybody into it at this point. I think that's a good consideration for this board to really think through that process. Is it wise to split it, or is it wise not to? So.
And Madam Chairman, I know we're not making the decision tonight, which I'm glad, because part of at least from when I recommended, I think that we do this meeting, the goal was to have the ability for patrons to come in and speak, I think, directly on this and hear information and give some opinions. And I know when we're done having your presentation, I'm sure, Madam Chairman, you're going to go to that next item and allow patrons who are here to comment on that. But it sounds like, did we, Madam Chairman, Mr. Rush, did we decide that we need to make the decision at the February meeting, or that from a time frame standpoint, May would still work?
I think think March.
Or March, I mean, March,
We have to make a decision at the March board.
at the March meeting. That's what we're tracking.
The legal date for making a decision is, we have to have the information to the county by April 1.
Okay,
Honestly, you can't. I mean, the county can't write their ballots and stuff if you did that to them. So it would have to be made there at the beginning of March,
the March meeting.
the March meeting.
Right. So, Madam Chairman, we potentially could, at our February meeting, again, have this as an ongoing discussion, maybe keep our agenda otherwise light if we can, and have this another,
Sure.
and don't, I mean, I'm not directing that, I'm just throwing that out for board discussion, but
Yeah.
that also to provide for patron input on that specific item, and again, to give us more options to hear from the community. So thank you. Those are the only things I had as we're going into tonight.
And Madam Chairman, I will have a proposal. You look at numbers, look at items at the February board meeting. So.
Madam Chairman and Wayne, my major concern is the maintenance of our current facilities. And it appears to me historically that we haven't kept up with that. And I would like to urge us to think seriously about even if we do build a new middle school or high school, we have these other buildings that we have to take care of. So we've got to set money aside. I don't know if the proper vehicle is a bond, or to me, it makes more sense to have a facilities levy to do the maintenance on an ongoing basis. That's just my concern. I don't know how, Wayne, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, that's why I'm actually proposing we split it and put a little more money into it. A little, $300,000 is a significant amount of money. And over a 10-year time period, $700,000 a year is $7 million. So that's a significant amount of money to put in facilities. There had been a lot of neglect, I will say, over the years in some of our facilities. Some of it is not neglect. It's just that when you get a 60-year-old building, things wear out. And so there are just major things that have to be replaced. And so it's not always maintenance that's the issue at all. It just happens to be that there is a time when you have to do major remodels or significant remodels on bathrooms and heating systems and those. So they're pretty normal. But I would say that we've made some significant improvements over the past few years in this effort. One, we hired Mike Smith, and he comes with a tremendous amount of expertise and experience in maintenance and owning his own company, and just a lot of information, and has been able to change the attitude, I'll be very honest, about how we approach maintenance within the district since he's been here. The attitude had been, let's do it as cheaply and as little as we can in maintenance. And that got us to where we are, quite frankly, a lot of that. And I understand that. I mean, I understand people trying to be conservative, but one of the things I asked Mike to do when he came is, one, not to do everything himself. When they get to larger projects, I want him contracting with somebody and bringing those people in that really know that project. He knows an awful lot. I trust him an awful lot, but there's only so much that your three people can do. And you've got to contract and bring that in. So that has been a huge impact. In your packet is the list of projects that Mike has put together since about when he came here, maybe not quite that far back, but pretty close. And we've made significant improvements in a lot of items as we've gone through with that. But maintenance is always one of those things where you're prioritizing and making decisions and moving forward. I think we actually right now know more about what's coming down the road than we've known, especially when I first came. We didn't have a list like we do today in front of you that said, here are all the things we know we got to do. We don't know when we're going to do them, or if we pass a bond, some of those items would go off. I mean, it would be, you're going to have to make some priority decisions. But it's important to know. For example, the boilers at the two elementary schools until Mike's been here and working with the maintenance or the boiler people. We didn't know the kind of condition those boilers were in and what to expect of them and from that. So I think that's a tremendous difference and improvement that we've made. And he's got two people working for him one is a licensed electrician and has many years of maintenance for a Simplot company that we just hired, and brings some real experience to us to help us make sure we do that. And the other man's done a lot of maintenance also, and as fast as any guy I've seen. So I just think we've made some real improvements in that area. Mike and I have spent a lot of time talking about this. Of course, your maintenance guy will tell you he can use as much money as possible, but you also have to balance that, where it is. And we think that number is pretty good for where we are. There's some assumptions in there that at some point we will be replacing and doing some major work with a bond. And so that will take some of these items off our list and allow us to do some pieces. But there are some significant projects that we're going to probably need to do that will eat up a good hunk of it. For example, one of the projects that we'll be talking about in a couple of weeks will be, do we move 5th grade back to Carberry Elementary? If we do, I'm saying $500,000. It may be less than that, but I would rather estimate more on a project like that. I have talked with some companies and gotten some numbers for us, but if we move 5th grade back, it's probably adding some classrooms, portables outside of Carberry and from that. So that would eat up a big hunk of next year's maintenance budget. So
Another question I had, kind of a follow-up, is I noticed there's 16 million on this list of all the projects. If we were to replace a school, that would take some of those down, as you said. But it doesn't take down all of it. It takes down, maybe if it's a middle school and you look at the middle school projects, but we've got 2 years, maybe 3 years before a school can be built. We've got to maintain our facilities for that period of time, if I'm correct, or we'll have further issues.
absolutely, there are things we'll have to do.
And it just appears to me that we still have to have a maintenance project out there.
Yep.
Something to fund this ongoing. Even after new school's built, we're going to have ongoing maintenance, or we'll be right back in the same position.
Absolutely. That's why. So let me give you a scenario that we've been thinking about now. So one of the proposals people are thinking about, I'm not saying this is the proposal, I'm just saying it's one of the proposals, is that if we build a new high school and move the middle school to the old high school, it's one of the proposals that's out there. So from a timing perspective, what that means is if you pass a bond in November, it's a pretty tight time frame to open the building 2 years from November or September 2 years later after November. So depending on whether we could get that and all that done, we could do that. So if you did that, you'd probably want to build the school, move the kids from the old high school to the new high school, remodel the old high school. You're probably a year into that process before you can actually move the kids out of the middle school. So you're talking 3-4 years down the road. And so there are just maintenance things you're going to have to do to continue to maintain the facilities over that time frame. Carpet wears out. We've got carpet that's worn out. It becomes a trip hazard. There are things you have to do to continue to maintain the building. You want to be smart about what you're spending and investing in areas that you think, well, there's a good chance that will continue within our community. It's one of the things at basketball court. I think one of the great observations of the tour was there are more basketball courts in Ridgeview High School than we have in our district. So
Fine.
I heard that at the basketball game the other night. And one of the issues was, girls basketball, boys basketball, we need more facilities because of that than we used to back in my day.
Yeah. So it's just that there are needs, right?
Yes.
And you're absolutely right. We have to have funds in a levy for facilities.
Putting the crystal ball out there, where do you where do you see the current middle school fitting into this picture as far as the auditorium and the basketball court? Do you ever see that going away or something we're gonna have to maintain because we need it?
Now you're asking for a crystal ball.
Well, that's a real crystal ball. I mean, just,
I think I could see a part of that building being brought down and saving that part of it, perhaps, just for a community. Maybe it becomes a community center and we give it to the city or something like that. I think we want to be careful. I have always been kind of careful about the thought that schools need to focus on what they do, which is schools. And we shouldn't just focus on maintaining old facilities for nostalgia or for other. But I think you got to be thoughtful about that. I'm careful about making that statement. You know what I mean? I understand, but I think that's important to think about. So I do think that there are a lot of needs that we will have in a district. And as we grow, there'll probably be more needs that we'll have. So I don't see this going away. Is the 700,000 exactly the right number? I think so. I actually feel pretty good about it. Because I've been here, this is my 9th year. We've been putting about, since the recession levy, which was the first one that I ran when I was here, which would have been in, I believe, 2011. That did not have very much maintenance in it at the time. We've been putting about $400,000 a year into maintenance in each one of the levies. And having a little, some more money to that, I think is enough to get us to where we need to be, especially if we look at a bond down the road. The other problem is can we pass a bond? I mean, that's not a guarantee. And so it may take 2 or 3 tries to pass a bond. I was talking with the notice superintendent today. I think it took them 3 tries when they passed one. So.
Madam Chair, Mr. Rudd. One question, just kind of piggybacking off of Mr. Fleming's comments. As far as if there was to generate any confusion by splitting them, has there been any consideration to maybe scratching the maintenance and operations levy and upping the plant facility, so we'd just be approaching the taxpayer with one option and it would get us where we need to go with the monies we're after? And then my second question would be, if in a perfect world it's 5 years or less down the road that we're able to build a new school and do those things, will there be any concern you feel in the community for putting these kind of monies, which I agree, what's laid out in the plant facilities levy is definitely, if we weren't going to build any new schools, I think all that's definitely very justified. Those facilities need everything that's listed there. Would there be any concern in the community about pumping those kind of monies into, say, like the junior high, and maybe it isn't standing in less than 5 years, kind of like the elevator issue? So I know I've thrown a lot at you, but kind of 2 different questions there.
So there's always concern in the community. So that I'll just give. And there should be concern about what we invest in over time, but we do have to invest in the facilities to make sure they're safe. They're sound buildings. They're able to provide warmth and comfort, for the students. That will take maintenance. There's, we've got, water heaters that are going to have to be replaced in that middle school between now and that time period. There will be, that roof probably really is going to have to get done because we got water coming down we were just lucky this winter, quite frankly. If we had a normal winter with snow, we'd have a lot more problem. Thank goodness we've just had a winter that, well, I hopefully aren't going to have too many of these because we won't have any water for farming, but it's pretty tough. So there probably is a concern, but you're going to have to continue to maintain your facility until you can do it. Now, we can be thoughtful about what do we spend the money on and how we do that. If we don't pass a bond, you may have to say, well, we're just going to have to invest a little more in it now for for a while when you're doing it. Things like an elevator, we were legally bound to put in an elevator. I mean, if you want to know the law on it, I'm happy to. Now, people always say, well, it's an older building, it's grandfathered, and that is true. The building is grandfathered. None of the programs in the building are grandfathered. You are not legally able to offer middle school in that building. There is a way to do it. If you have a second middle school that is ADA compliant, so you could open a second middle school and not build an elevator. So trust me, the elevator is much cheaper than the second option.
Well, yeah, and I definitely don't argue the need for an elevator. I guess the point I was getting to is we're kind of in that no man's land of darned if we do, darned if we don't. And my point being the elevator, it's like, you know, in the community, there's conversations, okay, we invest 300 and, you know, whatever the change was, into the elevator, you know, that's something, that's an investment. If we tear it down, we're not going to get back. That's kind of my point. But,
yeah. Well, I think that's the decision that we need to be thinking about it. So I had a proposal for that and I didn't go over very well. And I'm happy to say, well, maybe there's a better idea out there. Honestly, I think that's a community decision.
So if we do shoot for the stars with kind of the toolbox we have before us and we ask the community to vote on what is needed here and we don't split it, can we do that where we ask for a plant facilities levy only, and instead of selling ourselves short, we up it a little bit to cover what the maintenance levy would have made up for?
So a plant facilities levy can only be spent on facilities,
Okay.
can't be spent on staff.
Mm-hmm.
So the items in the operations part could not be spent using a plant facilities levy.
All right.
You could probably increase it and then not put any additional money into, but there isn't very much in there that's not, I mean, and I don't think you can do plant facilities on like paying for power bills and that type of stuff. It has to go for maintenance of facilities, not for that. So plant facilities ties your hands. It says it will be used for certain items. The only item that really jumps out of there is you can do some bus purchases, but beyond that, the law is pretty specific about what it can be used for.
So, Madam Chairman, when we do make the decision on how to proceed, certainly one of the decisions we could make would be to split it and then set the amounts if we split it, to have two options, or alternatively keep them together but increase the levy amount instead of 1.4, levying for 1.4, perhaps levy 1.5 or 1.7. Which gets us additional money on the plant facility, on the facility side, and that would be a 2-year commitment, which some could argue if that option would enable for the better strategic planning as it relates to the major bond at that point. And I'm not disputing that. We need to understand that we're going to have a $700,000 or more every year obligation to our current facilities, and that needs to be there. But at least it's an option that the board would have that kind of could consider it that.
And actually, I would be happy at the next meeting to actually bring both of those proposals so that you can look at it both. The one consideration there is that a plant facilities levy in our current state, it's 55%. If we pass a bond, and there's some legal issues here I would have to go explore because this is not an area I've ever spent really much time in it. But if we pass a bond and actually go out and sell those bonds, at that point, I believe we have to pass it at 66 2/3 for that plant facilities levy. So
You mean going forward?
pass rate, because we don't have a bond, is at 55%.
I see.
If we pass a bond, the pass rate goes to
If we
There's an interim number in
if we
there.
subsequently decided to do a plant facilities levy and we have an existing bond, then you're saying the pass rate might go up.
Would be at 66 and 2/3. There's three levels, 55, 60, and 66 and 2/3. But if we pass a bond, we're going to be at the 66 and 2/3. That's where we would be at.
I guess another question that came up when we were talking about, you mentioned water heaters and things are going to need to be changed. Do we have as we sit here, have we made projections, particularly at Carberry and Shadow Butte, that we've got a plan in 2 years, the carpet's going to need to be replaced. In 3 years, the interior needs to be painted. I mean, and then we have projections on dollar amounts. Do we have that kind of a strategic maintenance plan or projections of expenditures over the next 1, 3, 5 years?
We don't yet. We're getting closer to that. I mean, we're in the process of trying to figure out those items. And we've had considerable discussions about, okay, so when do we think these boilers are going to need to be replaced? And we think they're going to be at about 2 years from now. And if I say something wrong, Mike, please correct me, because I'm using my old mind here. So if it's not the discussion we've had. So we've said, well, it looks like we're going to need to replace these boilers in about 2 years. We need to start replacing the carpet in those facilities probably about 3 years out. And we really like the idea. I think on the tours, we got to see a lot of polished concrete. From a maintenance perspective, it just drives your costs down. At the big high school, they just got a machine. The guy's driving around on it, and that's all they do. They just wash it at night. It's done. You never wax it. You never have to deal with it, and it's permanent. So we've looked at what are those types of things we need to do. And we haven't got it put together yet, but that's part of why we wanted to start putting together the master list that we've been working on for the past few years and start putting together that plan.
I imagine, and I recognize, Madam Chairman, Mr. Rush and Mike, that's an incredibly difficult concept to do. But it seems to me that it's a benefit, not only to this district, but many others, and I assume others do, in fact, use that approach, because it takes away from the scenario, looking back, we neglected, and we should have, been more thoughtful in our planning. And if we have a plan out there that we every year that we, strategically we're budgeting for, in next year, it's in our plan that we have to replace the carpets. All of them might not need to be replaced, but they, that's in our schedule right now, and we need to meet that schedule. I'm sure there is a phrase for that approach in maintenance planning and things, and I don't know what it is, but I understand the concept. So anyway, I'm glad to hear that that's because I think that will take away from some argument that going forward we could be in the same situation as we are now and not having properly dealt with. Now, obviously, with middle school and high school, if one or both of those are going to be involved in a major bond, hopefully successfully, that is passed, then again, our focus has to come on these buildings that are 20 years old, and there's going to be increasing costs with those buildings. And I think your $700,000, knowing nothing about any of it, might be very conservative, and hopefully it's.
Well, and those buildings are only 20 years old. This building's a little older than that.
And then this building, of course, too. Yeah, right.
You're absolutely right. I will tell you just a little bit on our planning process. So we redid our 10-year plan in 2015, I believe is when it is, and completed that at the end of the school year 2015. Which is a process where you go through, and it's actually a form we use where you actually go through the facilities and you look at the floor and you say, we've rated this floor, and you give it a number rating that you go through it. And then you take that number rating and actually it generates a number of how much money you need to start spending on that. So we've been using that to kind of begin the process. Then we've been building these lists so what are the things we need to do? Now we need to go the next step. And Mike and I have talked about, I think Middleton School District has a software program that helps them manage that. And we wanted to go explore, are there some software programs that will help us better manage those types of things so that we can get away from the Excel spreadsheets, although I love them, but I don't think there's an efficient way to do that. And so I'd like to say that we should just jump in and finish that, but unfortunately I've got a maintenance director that also has to do maintenance every day. And so we've got to balance that workload as we go forward. But we are making progress. And I think that process and that form, I believe that is on the website. It should be. Sure, I've asked Crystal to put it on a couple of years ago, which has all of the buildings and the amounts that we've looked through. We stole it from Middleton, to be honest with you, and then have moved forward. That helped answer any question.
Madam Chair.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Yes.
I'm sorry, another question I had, Mr. Rush. In the projects over 500,000, there is the need for the construction of a CTE building. I was just curious of what your thoughts and approach are behind that. And the reason I bring that up is because during the last bond process and discussion, there were some conversations in the community that I'd see on social media where people were confused by that. So I know Trustee Vickery at the time addressed that about, because we have a CTE solution, as I understand it, from the reporting of some of our board members who kind of crossover had said that there's interest in that program for building their own facility, whether it's adjacent to the high school or in another location. So I was just wondering about doubling up that effort or what the approach is there.
So first off, Hayward Technical Academy, the only way they actually have to build a CTE building is to borrow money. Actually, go to the bank and borrow money, or go to an organization and borrow money. There may be some grants available. The Bloom Foundation here in Idaho does provide some funds for facilities for charter schools. But almost every charter school has had to go out and borrow money to do that. They receive $40,000 a year for facilities. Okay, that's what they get from the state to manage a facility. If you quickly take any number you would like and try to say, what can I buy for $40,000 a year? You're not going to build an $8 million facility. Yeah, I mean, the money just isn't there. I mean, the numbers actually do not add up. So the second thing about this is that, and I think we saw this in Ridgeview High School very clearly, is that CTE needs to be intimately integrated into your high school programming. You know, your sports med program they have there is next to their, you know, all their sports. It's right there available, so it's able to do that. Culinary arts is right there by the kitchen area at Ridgeview High School. One of the things that I was fascinated about it is they were connecting the prop construction for plays with their professional technical drafting program facility. So it's actually right there. So these programs are really about providing our students with these opportunities, and we need to provide those students with the opportunities. So I think whatever happens there in any way, these are the Emmett School District's professional technical programs. And we need to make sure that we're providing quality facilities for them. And I have made no bones about the fact that we have the worst ag shop in Idaho, I believe. And I'm disgusted that we have it. We shouldn't have a shop like that. I taught in I would trade the building I taught in 1983 for the one we have right now, because it was a much better facility in a town that had only Kendrick, 400 kids in the school district, not counting the high school, 100 and some in the high school. You know, we need better facilities for professional tech, especially in today's world. These kids need to be prepared for college and careers. They need, and when I talk about college, I'm talking about 2-year technical programs and preparing for that. They need facilities to do that. I'm adamant about that. That's just it. So providing the CTE program, I believe there isn't going to be funding. It's going to be very difficult for them to fully fund that. I think that we can certainly partner with them. Part of my thought has been, they talk about a $600,000 that they've been able to spend for that. I think one of the things, if we could put it in a bond, build the building for the $600,000, they could come in and actually outfit it very nicely. Because the equipment isn't cheap. That type of equipment isn't cheap for technology and what it is. So I think that type of partnership is really what we need to be looking at as we go through it. So.
Okay, thank you.
I've run those numbers a few times
Right.
trying to say, is there any way to do it? And they're, you know, the state gives them not enough money to do it. It's just 40,000 doesn't go very far.
Right.
Especially when you put a couple million, you just. But a partnership would work.
Right.
Let's get good equipment in there. And I was really at the Ridgeview High School. I wish you all could have seen it. And if you ever want to, the principal sent me a note today saying, anytime you want to come and see it. So, but they have what they call their ag facility. It actually has ag and drafting and others. That's right there behind their high school. It's just a really nice building, I thought. I felt it was, I don't know what you felt, but I felt it was just a really nice facility and had a lot of flexibility to it, so they could adjust it and change it as they needed. So. Other questions? You asked a question I haven't answered, and I don't mean to forget about him. You asked what things I've added. We added some, we've got to do some remodel on our special ed classrooms at the middle school and here to facilitate some of our special ed needs that we have. We're doing a remodel right now on just one little room at Carberry, but so I've added that. And I added some numbers to the piping for the other schools, and
That's the sprinkler piping.
the sprinkler piping. And Mike, do you remember, I'm sorry, we were sitting,
Restroom stuff here.
yeah, let me pull it up. Sorry.
When you say, the middle school, you're talking about the little building behind?
Where our special ed rooms are, yes.
You're talking about the heating issue, or is that something totally different?
Yeah, we just are going to have to improve those facilities to deal with some kids that we know are coming up,
Oh, I see.
that we're going to have to be able to provide a safer environment for them. So it's going to take some dollars to do that. So at special ed room improvements is what we added for the middle school. I don't think we added anything at the high school, did we? Nope.
No.
We added a storage shed at Shadow Butte. They've been asking for that a long time. It's just $5,000. And we figured out what we should be doing on that. I don't think anything additional at Carberry. What we did add on those is the the piping was in there, but it didn't have a number. It had some number amounts too. We did add, that's about $150,000. Replace the modular for our Ames program here at Butteview Complex. That modular is starting to frighten all of us. And we do have some bathroom upgrades in here as we do it. Oh, and the playroom, I don't know if we had this on it or not, but we've got a preschool. We just need a little fence out there to help out with that one. That will probably be on the list for next year. I assure you that'll be on the list for next year. And then suite, we added what? I thought paving the parking lot.
Yeah.
We just got some probably not pave the whole thing, but we're gonna have to replace some parking up there and do some paving around that parking lot. So that's what we added to that. Other questions? I think I cut you off, Bob.
That's okay. I save it for another day. I would be more interested on what the patrons have to say at this juncture.
Anybody on the? Thank you. Okay. So, on patron input, we have Mike Kimball.
Okay, so I had something kind of thought up here, but I listening to some of the different opinions of different trustees. Oh, sorry. I would recommend or like to see if we could work towards getting a minor or a facilities levy that gets us through to where we can put together an effective bond and target what school or schools we are going to replace in that next bond. And then once we have that established, then if the bond passes or fails, then we can go after the 10-year and more strategically based upon that. I agree with Mr. Rush on possibly waiting until November for the bond. I really think that the community, the board, and the community members, effective groups such as the Farm Bureau, other groups that are out there, Rotary Club, whatever that be, come together, come to with a planning committee and go after what school we want to replace or schools, however we want to look at that, whether that be like the middle school, high school, however that goes, and then work together with the selected architects, construction management firms to kind of get effective budgets so we know what we're going to replace and what the dollar figure is going to really be. On Trustee Fleming mentioned it about the replacement and in the construction industry, we call that the life cycle on our stuff. And I know Mr. Smith has kind of walked into it after years and years. And you're right, there are programs that track that. As we, in my opinion, and I'm sure Mr. Smith's aware, is as we replace these things, the manufacturers of these products tell you as the owner what we have to do to maintain it to get the optimum out of that facility, whether that be an air conditioning unit, whatever. So I think we need to focus in on that so that as we go to Shadow Butte and Carberry and those schools and focus in on what needs to be replaced immediately, what needs to be replaced over the next 5 years, and then making sure that we're maintaining those properly so that we get the most out of it. So I would like to recommend to the board, if we have to do a bond for our new school in the near future, is we focus on that really hard between now and basically September 1st on that $2 number we're gonna go after for which school. I'm in favor of the middle school. And then the facilities in the short term, we work with the principals and Mr. Smith and what needs to be replaced or fixed as a kind of I guess, lack of better terms, as a crutch until we can know how our bond's gonna go and then go for a longer term facilities levy to fix what we're not gonna do in the bond. That would be my recommendation. I think if we do our bond right and we involve the right groups in the community, I think we'll have better success in passing in November if that's how we go. Kind of what I thought.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
are you suggesting you think we should be looking at a 2-year and with the idea of looking at a bond later? Is that what you're?
Yeah, I think, I would hate to, you know what it's like. Yeah, you don't want to put money into a dead horse. If we're going to replace a building eventually, we don't want to go do a whole bunch of upgrades to it. And then in the 3-4 years later, we're going to tear it down or whatnot. So I think that if we should go look at that route and then target that. And then That way we're not spending money we don't have to. Now, if we say we target the middle school or the high school, there's things that's gonna have to be done to get us till that new school is open. But we don't wanna, and we know that in the community and we know that as the district, but we're not putting in something to carry us out another 10 years or 15 years on, is what I would like to suggest. And even if that 2 years got to be a little higher, then I think you may get more support that way. That's just my 2 cents on it. That's how I wouldn't want to put money into a dead horse essentially if we're gonna tear it down or go that route.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Terry Jones.
Okay.
No comment.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead. Please state your name, please.
Nicole Mitz. Actually, I was wondering if there was in the law somewhere stating that the carpet has to be replaced after X many years to place. It's like 6 years if you're renting out an apartment or something, you have to change the carpet. So I was wondering if that applies to schools.
No, the issue we get into is safety issues. So one of the things you look at is when you start getting a tear like that in carpet and it becomes a trip hazard, you're going to replace it. So
I didn't know legally if there was some.
there is no requirement for when you replace it other than safety.
Anybody have anything else?
I will add one thing to that. We do have, they won't tell you on carpet except for safety issues. They'll say, you got to do here, you got to do it. Every spring, the state inspector comes through, goes through all of our buildings and comes up with a list that we have to fix. Some of those are, tell the teacher to stop stacking the boxes that high. I mean, and we tell them all that before the safety inspector comes, but sometimes they don't listen. But some of it is, here's another issue that you need to deal with. So we do have safety inspection every year from the state. So no.
In every school. The safety inspector goes to every school.
Every district, yeah, every school in the state. Yeah, there's, I don't know how many of there are. There's a few of them that go to everybody, so.
Board, do you have anything else you'd like to discuss this evening?
What's the schedule on our, we got an interview on the 1st,
Yes, on Friday,
and that will be at what time?
3:00
3 o'clock.
here.
So, Madam Chairman, I'll bring 2 proposals to the next board meeting. I would like to put them down as an action item, but we don't have to make any action on them. But I did that at the last board meeting, so it's fine. But just so that we know we're going to do an action on it as we go forward. But I'll have a split proposal and a non-split proposal. Is that, you comfortable with those 2? Okay. And you've seen a lot of the numbers, so they're not going to change dramatically here as we go through it. And we'll do the prioritizing. We'll give you a prioritized list. I've discovered that our prioritized list usually changes between, we do one about this time of the year, and I can always guarantee about summer, something has changed on that prioritized list. It's just the nature of maintenance,
Madam Chairman, Wayne, I think I'd be really interested in just looking at, the 5 years if we're talking about short term, just to see what our maintenance schedule is so we can kind of back into that figure.
Okay, we'll work on that.
All right. That's everything. We need a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Not everybody at once.
I'll second it. I'll second it.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
sent you.
How long it's gonna take? I shouldn't have done
I
that.
think we're all fine.
Oh,
Do you guys got notes for me?
Monday part.
A lot.
Do you want them?
I will send all 300. I always
Okay.
want them back.
Okay, well, and technically, from what I've been told, I'm supposed to copy them and give them.
I'm sure it's Wednesday, but I'm doing this off the top of my head.
Do to save paper is I'll copy them once, scan them,
Make sure that
and put them in the board
Tuesday
packet
afternoon. But other
for you
than
guys
that.
to have access to them, so that I'm not printing a copy of his notes for all of you, your notes for all of you. Technically, that's what I'm.
Well, I'm sure Tuesday works, but I'll let you read in the morning. I just need to talk with.
No, okay.
We're meeting in the morning to go over the presentation.
Yes.
He's telling me what I'm supposed to say.
I was-
So, once I know that.
Okay, I'll let you, all right.
Do you have anything that I need to?
Thanks for your questions.
Okay, I'll be right back.
If there's any more, let me know.
that's.